I've spent my entire life in a small village, where secrets barely last a day. Everyone knows everyone's business, and every rumor spreads faster than wildfire. Life here isn't about chasing big dreams or grand passions. It's about survival. Relationships are practical, less about love, and more about sharing life's burdens. I've never been married, officially, but I've had a few live-in relationships over the years. Most of them ended peacefully. We'd agree it wasn't working, pack our things and move on without bitterness. But one relationship didn't end quietly. It exploded, leaving me with a sense of betrayal I'll carry for the rest of my life. I've spent life looking for an event to explain, but that's assumed everything. It started during shepherd season, a time of year that holds special importance in our village. Every February, the men gather in the old administration building to elect shepherds for the grazing season. To outsiders, it might sound like a quaint tradition, but for us, it's serious business. Our livestock is our livelihood, and the wrong shepherd can spell disaster. The candidates are usually the same every year, experienced men with strong hands and sharp eyes. The problem? Most of them drink too much. They'll promise to quit, but the bottle always wins. That's why, for the last 4 years, I was one of the few men entrusted with the job. It's not glamorous work, but it's steady, and it pays well enough to see me through the winter. My day started at dawn. I'd saddle up my horse, grab my whip, and lead the sheep to the pastures. My partner, Askar, worked in shifts with me. 2 days on, 2 days off. A quiet, steady Kazakh man. Askar was someone I could trust completely. The younger shepherds, Vanya and Artyom, handled the cattle. Vanya, at 21, was eager to prove himself, though his inexperience sometimes got the better of him. Artyom, closer to my age, was calmer and more measured. Together we kept the animals safe and the system running smoothly. Most days were uneventful. We'd drive the herds to the pond, let them graze under the trees, and pass the time fishing or napping in the shade of the old oak. At the time, I was living with Tatiana. She wasn't my wife. Her husband was alive, but in prison. He'd been gone for years, and Tatiana had long since stopped waiting for him. Like many women in the village, she needed someone to share the burdens of daily life. Chopping wood, fixing fences, planting the garden. These weren't things she could do alone. I didn't mind. Tatiana was a good woman. At least, that's what I thought. She cooked meals that could make a hard day of work feel worth it. She kept the house spotless, and took pride in her garden, where she grew everything from potatoes to herbs. But there was one thing that always bothered me: her constant trips to the neighboring village. She claimed she was bringing food to her brother, who couldn't work because of his health. "He has high blood pressure," she'd say. "He can barely get out of bed some days." At first, I believed her. Families here often supported each other like that. But as the weeks went on, her excuses started to wear thin. "If he's so sick, why doesn't he move in with us?" I asked one evening, as she packed another basket of food. "He's too proud," she replied curtly. "He doesn't want to be a burden." Her answer didn't sit right with me, but I let it go. I had no reason to doubt her. Not yet. One morning, Askar asked me to cover his shift. He had business to take care of in the city, and I agreed without hesitation. It wasn't unusual for us to swap shifts. We trusted each other. Askar and I went to sleep in each other's beds. At first, I didn't wake up. That day, I saddled up early, rounded up the sheep with Vanya and Artyom, and drove the animals to the usual spot by the pond. The cows spread out under the trees, the sheep clustered together, and we settled in for what I thought would be another quiet day. But something felt off. The mosquitoes were relentless, the sun was too hot, and I couldn't shake a sense of unease. I decided to walk along the edge of the ravine, hoping to clear my head. That's when I noticed movement among the bushes. It was subtle, just a flicker of fabric in the shadows. Curious, I climbed down to investigate. What I found made my stomach turn. There, tangled in the grass, were Vanya and Tatiana. Their clothes were disheveled, and the look on her face, guilt mixed with defiance, told me everything I needed to know. Anger surged through me, hot and uncontrollable. Without thinking, I cracked my whip across Vanya's back. He yelped and scrambled to his feet. Tatiana didn't say a word. She just grabbed her things and ran. I climbed back up the ravine, my mind racing. The betrayal stung, but more than that, I felt humiliated. How long had this been going on? How many people knew? I forced myself to stay calm. If I lost control, I'd end up in jail, just like Tatiana's husband. Later that afternoon, Vanya approached me, his face pale and his hands trembling. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Sorry doesn't cut it," I snapped. "There's something else you should know," he stammered. "You're not the only one she's been seeing." I glared at him, my fists clenched. "What do you mean?" "She's been sneaking off with Asgard too," he admitted. "And Arliom. Whenever one of them goes to the village, she's with the other." His words hit me like a hammer. My mind reeled, trying to make sense of it. Tatiana had been juggling 3 of us, 4 if you counted her husband. And I hadn't suspected a thing. Huh. "How long?" I demanded. Vanya shrugged helplessly. "A few months, maybe more." I shook my head in disbelief. "Get out of here," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. When I got home that evening, Tatiana was gone. She must have known I'd found out and decided to leave before I could throw her out. I didn't bother looking for her. She wasn't worth the effort. He read the letter within her, but the story didn't end there. A few months later, Tatiana's husband was released from prison. Apparently, she'd been writing him letters the entire time he was locked up, painting herself as the loyal, faithful wife. But someone else had been writing to him too, detailing her affairs with me, Vanya, Askar, and Artyom. When he came home, he didn't waste any time. One punch was all it took to knock her out cold. She ended up in the hospital with a broken jaw, and he went straight back to prison. As for me, I moved on. Life in the village returned to normal, or as normal as it could be after all that. I kept working, kept to myself, and tried not to dwell on the past. But every now and then, I think about Tatiana and the web of lies she spun. Trust is a fragile thing, and once it's broken, it's almost impossible to repair.